And no, I'm just kidding, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of The Good Thing. This time we are actually not live. We're recording this because tomorrow, when we usually record, is Easter weekend. So tomorrow is Good Friday and then Easter Monday, the following Monday. And some of us are celebrating. For those that are celebrating, I hope you enjoy a great Easter weekend with your family. For those that do have the day off, maybe watch this episode while you're hanging out with the family. It would be great. But we didn't want to miss our routine every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern time and 3 p.m. Central European time is when The Good Thing goes live. And we didn't want to miss that time because we have a really exciting couple of weeks. And so today, it's a little bit of an improv session. We didn't have a cool topic to talk about other than what we've been building. And so today we invited Dustin, our co-founder and CTO. Obviously, you see my co-host Jens always is joining me on today. And today we're going to talk a lot about what we've been building, especially around with AI, MCP, and we even have a small demo for you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed this format just as much as you enjoyed the live one, but we wanted to keep the consistency. Feel free to add comments to the video, though, to let us know what you guys thought about it. But yeah, Jens, how are you doing today? Doing good?
Yeah, I just realized, this is something, it hurts my eyes, but can you make a capital F for co-founder in your name?
I actually can. Yeah, I can do that live. Hold up. Edit. Name. One sec, guys. How do you know you work with developers? Is when they are anal about the small details. I like it.
Now you know about Stefan's life as a co-founder. Like whenever there's like a little tiny thing, like your co-founder finds it and annoys you about it.
It works. I'm like a little co-founder, with the little F. But I fixed it. Are you happy now? Are we good?
Yeah, it's awesome. And Dustin, you've been busy the
Is
last couple of days.
Is my background okay?
Yeah,
could be better.
Looks a
could be
bit blurry. It's fine. Okay, Dustin, you've been busy.
Yeah.
So we have built some stuff, and we want to. Yeah. Well, what are we doing? What are we helping people with?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not going to say it. Dustin, from your point of view, what have you been working over these past couple of weeks? And you can keep it technical, and then we'll strip out the non-technical stuff for our non-technical viewers. But what have you been working on these last couple of weeks?
I think if you're closely, or you do not even have to closely follow the tech news, but I think you're experienced like a huge hype around MCP, and everyone wants to provide their own MCP, either from your own SaaS product or from your local services. Everyone wants to provide MCP services so that AI models, LLMs, can connect against it and enrich their context to do more things than they could do before.
Well said.
And what I have observed a lot is that everyone is doing that, SaaS providers, Superbase, etc. But nobody is really focusing on the people who actually running software on their own, on premise. And wouldn't it be awesome if you would have an already existing API landscape? Let's say you're using Cosmo or any other GraphQL provider, and you could easily just expose this data but in a secure way, expose this data to an LLM model to help to automate your workflows, like building apps, accessing the data, building reports, building presentations, without writing any line of code. And so we analyzed the market. We figured out that actually what we have already with Cosmo is like everything you need to build this scalable, secure, and centralized MCP gateway to provide this to our customers. And so what we have built in the last 7, I would say almost 14 days, is to build like a first-class integration with MCP. So it allows you to implement what in the GraphQL space is trusted documents, persistent operation. It allows you to expose those operations through MCP, and then you can easily connect it to your AI tools like Cursor, Claude Desktop, OpenAI, or other agentic frameworks to automate workflows. Yeah.
And And I was telling my wife about this the other day. So I was trying to explain to her what MCP was, and let me know what you guys think of her analogy. So she said, basically, MCP is when you take your phone and you plug it in. You plug in the USB-C into your phone, and then you plug it into your laptop. And you remember when that pop-up pops up, like give access to this computer? And so then when you're on the computer, you can access the information that's on your phone. And she's like, is that what you're doing? You're letting products get access to Cosmos. So let's say someone builds on top of Cosmos. Are you giving them access that they can start building from all that data and stuff like that? What do you guys analogy?
I would say it's even simpler. Imagine you have a conversation with 4 people, and a guy represents a system. So with MCP, you just bring another person into the discussion, and then you can discuss the things, and you can come up with a solution based on what context there can provide to the conversation.
I like that. What about you, Jens?
I want to take one little step back, because everybody can build an MCP server, right? And like MCP, it's a protocol. Now, if you go to, for example, the subreddit /MCP, like there's so many MCP servers, like everybody's building MCP servers. By the way, I have just used one really cool one, because I wanted to build a new landing page today. And I thought, okay, I want to know, does it have a good Lighthouse score? So I added a Lighthouse MCP server because somebody has built it already. So now my cursor can change something on the website and then run a Lighthouse test without me, because I'm too lazy opening the browser and clicking on Lighthouse test. So I can now do that. So yeah, like essentially what Dustin said, you can now, instead of clicking around, you can now just write what you want, and cursor ensures that MCP ensures that cursor or your model, it can now talk to Lighthouse score, it can talk to Cosmos, it can talk to GitHub. That's right. But one step back, because everybody can build an MCP server. Now there's a new problem. So you have this huge opportunity that a model can now, through MCP, talk to anything. The problem is we need to bridge between anything and MCP. And so this is the problem Dustin was looking into, because we already have a solution to turn anything into something very specific, and then go from something very specific to MCP. And so in our case, I mean, you know us, this anything, it is the concept of the supergraph. It's the concept of graphical federation. If we have a graphical federation layer, and our router can go from federation to trusted documents /MCP. So now MCP can actually talk to all the things we have already federated. So that means if we have this component that goes from federation to MCP, all we have to do as a company is bring more capabilities to our federated graph, and it becomes available to MCP. It becomes available to the models. The problem: do you want to give everybody access to everything? Do you want the model to do whatever it wants? Do you somehow want to limit that? And now you can even ask yourself the question: if let's say you're not doing federation, you just have MCP, and you manually implement from MCP to anything. Essentially, this MCP server is now a BFF, and you will very likely want to have one MCP server per use case, because let's say you are a big media company that offers streaming services, and let's say you have hundreds of microservices. Do you really want to create one single MCP server and for all use cases and give that to a model? Like, first of all, the model will be overwhelmed by the capabilities. You will have problems because these features, they come from over 100 microservices. So there's a lot of people behind that. Do you really want to bring all of this together in a BFF? It means that you now have to maintain a BFF across, I don't know, 100 services, potentially hundreds of people. So you're kind of back to the BFF versus federation problem, where now the API consumer, it is not the website, or it is not one single web front end. You know, we had BFFs in the past, like SoundCloud, where you have multiple apps. You have like web, iOS, Android, etc. For each app, you have a BFF. And now there's a new API consumer. It's not a website. It's not a browser. It's not an app. It is a model. And we have different models and different tasks models should do. So now we need BFFs for these models, or we do what Dustin has built, because that means we're not building one BFF per model, per use case. We all contribute to the Supergraph, and with, a tiny amount of work, we create an MCP server for a very specific use case. And I think that's ultimately it's the right approach, because if we're not doing it like this, so what are the alternatives? If we don't use the approach by Dustin, we will essentially go back to the BFF pattern. And everybody is currently talking about how we have API sprawl, and we have too many BFFs, and there's too little resources to maintain the BFFs. So if we don't have the resources to maintain BFFs for different apps and websites and products, we also don't have the resources to maintain BFFs for MCP, for models. So there needs to be a solution. And Dustin,
one comment
maybe, sorry.
One comment on the BFF analogy. I think also important is that you have to re-implement everything. Authorization, authentication, telemetry, who is using what. And rather than doing it twice, why not putting the MCP, expose the MCP on the source of truth?
Yeah, thank you for the curveball. I actually forgot this, but it's so true. No, that was actually one of my bullet points. If you have 100 microservices and you build an MCP server, and now in this MCP server, you implement authorization, and then someone else builds another MCP server for another use case. So now you're building authorization for that twice. Yeah. If you build this on top of your Supergraph and you put authorization into the Supergraph, now it's a solved problem for both cases. Plus, our router, it already has authentication, authorization. It has analytics. It has all these things.
And
so
schema
usage. What? Was
schema
it the right
usage?
term?
Yeah,
it was right. It was right.
Yeah. You know who's using what, etc. And then you have breaking change detection. This is not. I mean, the funny thing is, an MCP server is really just a BFF. And if you manually build this BFF, you don't have a real-time map where you know that clients, in this case MCP clients, they talk to your backends. You don't know that because there's the MCP in the middle. With federation, we have schema usage, so we know that an MCP client is talking to your subgraphs. We know that, so you cannot break it. So
that part right there, though, you cannot break it. So the CEO of BrowserBase, he tweeted the other day that like MCP is great for 80%, but that 20% where it connects and makes sure that nothing breaks, that's where it hallucinates. And I was talking to you, Jens, about this, and we were talking with one of our customers that the power of federation, if you strip it away, is checks. Is this going to break a client? Is this going to break an API? And what I think is so powerful behind what we're building is that we give you the power of MCP, we give you the power of AI and generative AI, but we're also making sure that you're not breaking anything. So we eliminate that 20% where it could hallucinate, it could break, because you're running checks against the schema. It tells you if it'll break it, and then it will tell you if you are going to break it, what you should do to not break it. And so that's just my non-technical piece I want to add there. I think it's too powerful, really.
But there's one more thing, because we're talking about checks and breaking changes and whatsoever, but we're also building a new product. We're not yet talking about it, but it's going to be amazing. And so this new product, it knows about, so Cosmo already knows that, but so we know about all your subgraphs, we know your schema, we know all your clients, including MCP clients. And the one thing that we find super interesting is we have built a serverless Cosmo router that is not serving traffic. It can batch generate query plans. And we were like, oh, interesting. We batch generate query plans. By the way, this is open source. Like everybody can just see this on our repo. We're not hiding this. So you can batch generate query plans. And if you look into them, we have created a very simple algorithm that calculates the complexity of a query plan. And so we can, for example, say if you have like a sequence, and then in the sequence you have two fetches, they get a certain score. If you have a parallel node and it has two child fetches, then the parallel two fetches, they have a lower score than a sequence of two fetches, because obviously, like, the sequence is slower. It has more of a cost. So we have built this cost function, and now what like you mentioned checks and breaking change. Cool, yeah, it's very important. Like, it's the foundation. But what I find also like super interesting is imagine you are making changes to your schema, or you're thinking about making changes to your schema, and now you can see, let's say you have 100 MCP clients that use your schema, and you know their complexity score, and you make changes, you move something around in your architecture, and you see that all scores they go up by 20%. So that means you would now negatively impact all the clients, all the models, because it's going to take longer. And this is also where I think federation, or what we're like, it's not federation anymore, it's more like what we're doing with it. It's so powerful to understand who is using what and what is the cost of using your architecture, because most of the time, let's say you have your client, you have your custom built MCP server, you will never understand what is the cost of calling a tool. And we can make that transparent, and we can tell you there's negative impact. So yeah, the Supergraph is powerful.
Let them cook. Let them cook. I really like it. Anybody can make changes. Anyone can run checks. I love it.
We have built a landing page. I think it is not yet live, right?
No, it's not. A little sneak peek today, though.
We're working on it. Okay.
So
today,
Dustin, go ahead.
We're introducing the MCP gateway, and Dustin built this page. So maybe you can guide us through, what's going on, what are the big concepts, the big topics, what does everybody need to understand?
Okay, so MCP is a protocol, so that means a server has to implement the protocol so that the client can speak to a server. So what we have done in the router, we have extend the capability of implementing a MCP server, and by using trusted documents, exposing those operations as MCP tools. And so the nature of an MCP server is it has a discovery endpoint. It has metadata, and it can provide the metadata to understand what tools, prompts, routes, and resources are available. So what we have built into the router, and we call it the MCP gateway, is a full integration with MCP protocol over GraphQL. So yeah, so that means we provide tools to discover your GraphQL graph, to discover what operation you have exposed through trusted documents, and by connecting all your services, we are providing access to your services through MCP. And if you look at the left side, you get a very I think good understanding of how that will work. You define a GraphQL operation, let's say a trusted document as a file on the file system. You put that for instance in the operations dir. Then we will automatically, based on the GraphQL operation, create an MCP tool, expose it through MCP protocol, And we also, based on your input, we infer the right JSON schema so that the LLM knows how to call that tool in a type-safe way. And we will also leverage this information to validate once you make a request to the router to ensure that this operation is valid according to the generated JSON schema. So here you see a very simplistic example, like someone has exposed a get product operation. It was exposed through execute operations underscore. And then if, let's say, you ask for a product price, the LLM would be able to figure out that because you have exposed this method to the LLM, I can call that to get the price.
Insane. Yeah, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, just a few questions for clarification. You mentioned JSON schema, and like I know what you're doing, but maybe we can explain for the audience what is the role of JSON schema in MCP, and what are we doing here to help people, make creating MCP servers actually easier?
Okay, if you want to expose an MCP tool, you need to define the contract. It's called the input contract. So what does an LLM has to call the tool in a way that it comply with your contract. So in case of this example here, the LLM has to pass an argument, a primitive argument of type string. But this can get much more complex. You could have recursive input types. You could, in a later demo, we will show you a find employees tool that allows you to filter for employees by nationality, mood, etc. So what we have to do is we take the input type, convert that into a JSON schema, and then provide this JSON schema to the tool so the LLM can understand how does the call has to look like in order to fulfill the user request in the LLM session. And this sounds very easy, but if you read the documentation of all the models, you will figure out that they do not support the full specification of JSON schema. They only support a subset of it. So, for example, they don't allow, they don't support recursive recursive structures. For example, if you would build this from scratch, you would detect recursions and you would replace them with, for example, definitions, references. And yeah, there were a lot of edge cases where we had to optimize that for LLM usage. So instead of providing definitions like add a $def definition as part of JSON schema, we just limiting the recursion at a specific def. So to produce a valid JSON schema. And then you need to understand that all these nuances of when is a feed nullable, we have to provide all the values in case of you're using enums. Required needs to be correctly implemented. When at least one argument is required, then the object is required of the input, and so on and so forth. And one comment. I think we will, when you scroll a little bit more, we will come to that.
Okay, but stay here for a second, because there's more to it. I could just create my own MCP server. I guess I would wipe code it, and I would just put like for real. I mean, who writes code today? So you wipe code it. You just give it this query, or you tell it like, here's a schema, and put this query. And would this just work, or what kind of problems can I run into if I build my own MCP server and just tell it like, hey, put this get product query? How will the outcome look like?
I mean, you would like to pass the exercise to generate a JSON schema, for instance. Is that right?
Yeah. So if you So let's say you wipe code the JSON schema for the query. You wipe code this. How confident would you be that this is correct?
I would say it really depends on how your proficiency in that domain. But I would say it's pretty difficult, because you would need to understand how the GraphQL specification works and how it will be, or how it can be mapped to JSON schema in that case. Yeah.
I think so. I think what would happen is you have this ID, which is mandatory. AI will probably figure out, okay, JSON schema needs to be a string and it needs to be not optional. And we can look at it as a human, because we need to review the wipe code stuff. And we will say, okay, this looks about right. But then later, I think you will show us an example of a more complex query and data structure. And it will very easily reach the point where our input variable, it is so complex that we are not 100% sure if every field the LLM has actually translated in the right pattern. And second, I think it can easily get to a level of complexity where we're not 100% certain anymore. Like, even if you look at it, you will not immediately see it's wrong. It could be wrong. So, I would
even say this is like the perfect example by not using LLMs for, because this is like a deterministic task to convert something from A to B. If you would use LLMs for that, it is super costly. But also that you wouldn't leverage the power of LLMs in that case, because LLMs are good at being creative, finding patterns. In that case, this is pure. This is an algorithm.
Yeah, this is what I actually wanted to get at it. That some problems, they are deterministic, and you can parse the query, take the AST, and generate the JSON schema with an algorithm. This algorithm can have tests, and now we are very much certain that the JSON schema is right. Or even if it's wrong, we know we have a bug. We can fix it. If you do this task with an LLM, it might be right, it might be wrong.
But isn't that kind of what I mentioned, though? Is that like with the schema checks that you kind of get the security that it'll work? So you get to the 80% vibe coded, but the 20% now with MCP and with Cosmo and just Federation in general, it makes sure that you're making the right decisions, even though you vibe coded it.
I would say it's a little bit different. I think the point here was you should not use LM at all to do this, to solve this puzzle here.
Okay, well said. And then, so if I scroll down a little bit, I want to understand this part here. So why you need MCP for your GraphQL API. And you listed these 4 points: AI discovery, operation control, rich metadata, and instant integration. Can you walk us through each of the points, Dustin? And then Jens, also feel free to jump in and just kind of explain to us why we need MCP for our GraphQL APIs.
Yeah, I think the first point, AI discovery, means it more or less inherits the benefit of the MCP protocol. The MCP protocol allows you to list tools and resources and so on, and this gives essentially the power to list what is your MCP gateway capable of. On the other hand, I think there's something what Jens mentioned, like if you're building if you have a route, a gateway which is connected by GraphQL Federation, and you can integrate any type of service. So essentially, you can expose anything to AI, because you can, by the nature of GraphQL Federation, you can just write a query that spans across multiple services and aggregate data. And this is this is more about the operation control, where you can create trusted documents on your file system, write the operation in a way that you only want to expose the data you really want to expose to LLM. For example, let's say you want to expose the list of employees, so you can build dashboards or you can build a report, but you usually don't want to export their location, their age, their bank information. the way how you approach this, you do not include this particular field in that trusted document, and that's everything you have to do to limit access to the LLM.
Insane.
Rich metadata, which is really important. So I think this is also like a super power of graph, because we have a unified supergraph schema. You can just add comments to the type definitions, to the root fields, and we will incorporate those information into the JSON schema definition, also the tool definition, to give the LLM everything to make the right decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last one's pretty explanatory, so you can connect it with any of the tools that you guys are using. So
Yeah.
ChatGPT, Claude, Cursor with minimal configuration. Jens, what kind of points do you want to add to kind of just like the benefits of MCP for your GraphQL API?
So one topic we talked about on LinkedIn and other discussions about MCP is if you simply expose a GraphQL API or a REST API or any API or a database through MCP, what is very likely to happen is that you give AI a task. You know, let's say the LLM model has a tool to get the whole GraphQL schema and then a tool to make queries and mutations. And now you type in a prompt to do something. Will it actually understand to look into the GraphQL schema, to then parse the GraphQL schema, which it can be so large that it actually goes beyond the context? And then will it be busy figuring out your schema, or will it actually answer your prompt? And so the problem we're solving here is, if we can persist some documents or create trusted documents, persisted queries, and limit what we want to expose. First of all, we make it technically much easier for the model to interact with our tools. And the second thing is, you don't just want to expose GraphQL or REST APIs through MCP. You want to carefully think about what are you exposing and what are the workflows you want to enable the model to do. Because a model is it's not a human that clicks on a user, that loads a user and then loads the posts and then adds a comment to the post. A model is an LLM that does a task. For example, one workflow we have in Cosmo is we have a query that's not working, and we want to go through a workflow to change the schema so that the query works. We call this the dream query workflow. So that's a workflow of like many steps that the model can go through to accomplish a task. So if you model your MCP tools, you need to think about these workflows, these like what should the model do? And so what you can do with like exposing operations by writing the query, each query you can give it like a description, and you can also tell the story of, okay, here's a tool to do this. It gives you an employee, and then you can also call another tool to do something with the employee. So you're explaining how the different tools interact, and then that enables the LLM to accomplish like a real task. So yeah, I think that's very important. The other parts, I think Dustin mentioned the most important things. One other comment is, I would say, we by simplifying the creation of an MCP server to write a GraphQL query, we actually give a lot more people access to this capability. You don't need to be a programmer to write a GraphQL query, because we also offer in the very near future tools to create a GraphQL query with a visual query builder, or even prompt to GraphQL query. So that means in the future, there will be a no-code solution or a low-code solution, so that everybody with a Supergraph, without technical knowledge, can create a secure MCP server for their particular use case. And so in this sense, we're also democratizing access to this capability.
Yeah, well said. So I do want to be conscious of time. So let's scroll down a little bit here and understand the available AI tools. And then Dustin, I would love to get into the demo. So we could just kind of speed run through these, but talk to me a little bit about these available AI tools, or the MCP shortcuts, as I call them. What do they do?
I would say I can present them in the demo.
Oh, okay, perfect. So guys,
Yeah.
this landing page isn't live yet, but you can see here, these are all the kind of AI tools that we have integrated with our MCP, and Dustin will demonstrate it actually in the demo. So let's switch over to that mode. Give me a sec. And give it a sec to render, Dustin, because it'll render in 4K, but maybe if you can make it a little bit bigger, it would be great. Okay, that might have been too big, but I think that looks good right there. But feel free to kind of just demo us for it and walk us through it. And then Jens, just feel free to poke questions into there so that way the audience can understand exactly what we're doing. But Dustin, take it away.
Okay, cool. So as we discussed, like the way how to integrate tools or exposing operations to the MCP protocol is to creating persistent operations, trusted documents. So it is up to you where you want to store them. So in that case, we have defined a storage provider with the ID MCP, and we choose the operations tier as the directory to where you're able to store the operations. And there are a few options you can choose from. You can define on what port the MCP server should be available. It is not possible to define the path because in the latest specification, the protocol recommends to expose the endpoint over the MCP/MCP endpoint, and I think this is a good default for the start.
Okay.
You can define a graph name to specify, or you give your MCP server name as your suffix. And then there are multiple other options. You can expose the full schema to the MCP, but what we usually do not recommend, because the recommended approach is to expose specific operations, but this might be useful for exploration or development. Then you can also enable the executing of arbitrary operations, which will expose an execute GraphQL tool. And you can also exclude mutations from your exposed trusted documents for safety reasons. And last but not least, we also expose the router URL, because sometimes you might have, or I think often you expose your router not through localhost, but on a domain.
Yes.
So that means in that case, your tooling, your MCP tooling, will be aware of where your router is actually hosted, so it can do real API integration. All right, so this has been already started. Let's take a quick look about the three operations. We provide an operation to find employees. We have a search input, which accepts multiple filters, like filtering by has pets, nationality. It also has a comment, which is pretty important because we will incorporate that into the JSON schema, as discussed before. We will have update availability to update, the availability of an employee by ID, and we can also update the mood of an employee. So pretty funny example. They are coming from our demo in the OSS repository. You can essentially try it out yourself. So the next step is to start the router, which we have already done.
1 second.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the operations and go back to the operation that has this comment? Yeah, here. This is in the schema, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what are you doing with it?
So when we convert, or when we walk through the GraphQL document, we will verify if there are any comments on these nodes. And when we find them, we will, while creating or while walking over the document, we will also create a nested JSON schema, the document, and we will incorporate this information into the field description field.
Okay, so this will be in the JSON schema, in the OpenAPI spec that we expose through the MCP introspection endpoint.
Exactly.
Okay, this is super important because, you know, everybody is lazy. Everybody's like, oh, like I don't care. I don't want to document my stuff, like code documents itself. No, it doesn't. And here's the thing. If you put good documentation into your GraphQL schema, we automatically stick that into the JSON schema for your MCP server, and now AI can introspect this, and it now can better understand what is possible. So by writing good documentation on the schema, you allow LLMs to be more precise, to better use your GraphQL API.
Yeah, 1%. And this one shows how we just add the documentation to the tool description. So because my operation has used find employee, and we have added a comment here, this will serve as a tool description for the MCP tool. And if you would have here multiple root fields, what we can do in GraphQL, then we would combine this into one big chunk of description, which then the LM can use to get the most of it. Yeah, so we have 3 operations.
Okay. So sorry for the interaction. I just I love these little details because it for LLMs, context is key. Everything you can tell it, it will be easier for the model to help you.
Exactly.
Okay, so continue. This is pretty sick so far.
Yeah. So we have the operations, we have the demo config, we started the router. Now we can try to connect it with Cloud Desktop. So
give it a sec to render, Dustin. It's a little bit blurry for me, and if you could zoom in, that'd be great.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the integration with MCP is, I would say, more developer focused. So essentially, you would need to go to settings, developer, and then you would need to configure your MCP in as a JSON. We will soon publish the documentation around this. It's just copy paste, and then you're good to go. But you also need to restart Cloud Desktop once you have configured your configuration. Okay, it's not visible, right? So
can you zoom in just a little bit? Make it a little bit bigger.
Zooming is not possible here. Okay.
You can't make it like the Control X, like on Mac, to make it zoom in.
Oh,
yeah. See? Yeah, Control X or Command X.
Okay, awesome.
There you go. Look at me. I'm teaching my CTO about some tech stuff, huh? Give it a sec to render. But okay, I see the prompt. It looks good.
So we have prepared a prompt. The prompt, what did we instruct the Claude to do? It should create a Next.js app that visualizes the most important data of our employees, but also allow us to manage them. So that means based on the exposed operations through the MCP protocol, the LM will be creative to building a dashboard to manage your employees. And there are some important, I would say, in prompt instruction you have to give the LM so that it does not hallucinate, or at least that the instructions are clear. It should not use mock data, fake endpoint. It should not reinvent stuff. It should focus on the integration with the exposed MCP tools. And yeah, so also important, and I wanted to share is, one sec. There is a tool called MCP Inspector. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Which allows you for debugging purpose to understand what tools an MCP server exposes. So before we run the prompt, I would like to show you what the LM will be accessible of. So it can, you see, we have exposed 3 custom operations. You see here's the description that we mentioned. Ignore this. This is just a demo. And here, what is the app availability operation capable of? What are the parameters? This actually reflects the JSON schema struct. You can see, for example, my employees. This is nested. But also we also provide an endpoint that gives the LM superpowers to understand how to run this operation in a real world scenario. Like, how does the endpoint looks like? How does the HTTP request has to look like in order to make a real and successful request against the router? So if we now start the the prompt, the LLM has access to all these tools, and based on our instruction, it will make the best decisions. And hopefully, we will create a next-level application which we can copy paste into our Cosmos Studio to manage employees.
Let's do it.
And if you click here again, just a side note, you can also here explore the available tools. And now let's kick it off. I think this takes around 30 seconds. Maybe if someone has something to say, it's the right moment. And here it asks for permission to get the info of the operation to understand how to run it. And it will do it for all operation that the LLM thinks needs access to.
So this is pretty incredible. And Dustin, so far, have you tried this with Cursor, or how come you prefer Claude Desktop?
I think it also works with Cursor, but I think for demonstration purpose here, this isolated view and the code generation I think it's much more appealing for our users here.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit more user friendly. And one of the things me and Jens were talking about is like the power of MCP and the power of like just using this and being able to generate it. You still need that developer background, and hopefully soon there's a way that we can kind of go past that and we could just talk to it and build things just like this without having to understand that background.
If you take a look at the description as a prompt, yes, really not. If you ignore this part here, which could be like a base template, and only look at this section here, there's nothing technical in it.
Yeah. Well,
except
Next.js app and Tailwind for styling. Well, you got to know what those two are.
Yeah.
But you know, one thing I have observed in the MCP community in the last couple of weeks is there's more and more people who are not developers who are now using Cursor to build applications and to achieve something, to automate something. And yes, you can make an argument and say, okay, there will be security problems and other issues, and I'm not trying to argue against it, but what I'm trying to get at is there's a new movement of like with Cursor, with LLMs, with MCP, more people are now able to automate processes, to build applications, and to get somewhere. So we need to think about security carefully, but I think in general it's an amazing movement.
Yes. So Claude is done. We can now, if you absorb this here, you see it has actually used the right endpoint, because this endpoint was exposed through the get operation info endpoint. It has set the right headers, the right request scheme. And yeah, because I instructed the LM to create a single page and not create multiple components, so it's easier to copy. Now I will copy it into our application. And let me share the result. One sec. This is, by the way, the Cosmo dashboard. So I just
you're abusing your local Cosmo dashboard to bring this in.
Exactly. So now you see it has requested all the data. Those are actually real requests against the API. And I can make employees happy, sad. I can make them available. I can filter for the marriage status. And to prove you that it's actually real data, we can open the GraphQL endpoint
and query it.
And query the data. And
this is so sick.
And you see Stefan is available. Who else?
Okay, now go to this dashboard and make Stefan unavailable.
So let me apply filter. Stefan, let's make it unavailable.
Okay, go to the API.
You see? So it was pretty much a one shot to generate an application to manage your employees. And now you can think of much more advanced and sophisticated examples.
It's sick. It's so sick.
Insane.
It's okay. I've seen it the first time, but I think this is very cool. Like you can very quickly build those internal apps, and you know that the interesting observation is in the past there was like, you know, retool and other things, and you had to manually connect the data sources, and you had to say, oh, here's my Postgres database. I now want to build this thing and take this column and take that. And now the new reality is you have a Supergraph, you have this MCP server, you write a prompt, and bam, dashboard. Like it's phenomenal. So to wrap this up, if I want to try this, okay, I know it's not yet merged, but let's assume you merge it end of the week. Where's the documentation? Where can I look? You don't have to show if it's not yet ready, but I can go to Cosmo documentation, right? And then
yeah, pretty much like Cosmo minus docs, and very soon here will be a new section called MCP Gateway, and there we will explain everything to onboard you on this feature.
We can even put a banner on the website just to guide people to it because it's so exciting. So
yeah.
We'll do that on our end. Guys, we are at time. As I mentioned, I hope everyone has a fantastic Easter weekend. The team will be off tomorrow and then Monday, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know. For our customers, we are so excited for you guys to try out this new feature. For everybody, we're excited to it. Let everybody build good APIs. Maybe that'll be our mantra. Let everybody cook. Everyone should build a good API. And Jens, what's the good thing?
The good thing is we're back next week.
We're back next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye.